So hello, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Louise Rowland and I'm Deputy Chief Executive of UFI VocTech Trust. And before we kick off, I thought I'd explain a little bit about how the session's going to work. So I'm going to do a bit of an intro about UFI and our VocTech challenge to set the scene for the discussion, and then introduce the panel and have a really good debate and discussion. Please do put your questions in the chat or the questions function, and we'll really endeavour to weave them in. So at UFI, we champion the power of technology to improve skills for work and better outcomes for all. And we've been grant funding, investing, and generally advocating for VocTech, that's tech to support adult vocational skills, since 2012. And we do this because we believe that through supporting better learning for work in all sectors, that the opportunities for personal, business and societal growth are immense. So needless to say, the past year has really shone a light on the role of tech in education. And at UFI, we know that digital technologies are way more ambitious and impactful than the use of remote platforms hastily deployed to deal with a crisis. We know people have made kind of a tremendous effort over the last 12 months, and we believe that digital tech has much more to offer. We also know that access to lifelong learning is key to a skill-led recovery, and these issues predate the pandemic. But the pandemic has amplified the need and accelerated the pace of change. And the impacts that come from not having the right skills for work are felt across generations and within generations, and those divides are growing. So, for example, the Resolution Foundation have recently published research that shows that older workers have seen the biggest fall in jobs since the 80s. The decline in employment rates for the over 50s has been twice as big as for those between 25 and 49. They also found that after losing work, older workers take the longest to return. Robert Halfron MP, the chair of the Education Select Committee, reported this week that participation in adult skills and lifelong learning is at its lowest level in 23 years. Even worse, those who might benefit most from adult learning and training, low-skilled adults in low-income work or the unemployed, are far the least likely to be doing it. And we know from the Good Things Foundation that it's this same group of people who are most likely to be impacted by the digital divide. So the question we ask ourselves at UFI is, what solutions can digital tools offer to help overcome, not exacerbate, these divisions and level up learning? So today we launch our white paper with a £2 million commitment for grant funding, best practice sharing and sector partnerships to unlock the potential of digital technology. And this white paper represents over 4 months of dialogue and consultation with nearly 100 partners, organisations and individuals as part of our VocTech challenge. How did we know we were taking the right steps and placing ourselves in the right pace to impact change? Well, we kicked off this process with an exercise of co-creation with our VocTech community. And using design thinking principles, we explored how VocTech could serve the needs of employers and learners, those most at risk from being excluded from education and training and being able to access employment. The findings of this work were published in our green paper in March, and I really encourage you to take a look. This sets out the broader VocTech landscape in a series of problem statements. And I encourage you to read these because there's loads of insights and learnings drawn from the wider societal context and things that are way beyond UFI's remit and influence, but are really poignant and meaningful for all of us to take forward in our practice in the vocational education sector. But at UFI, our focus is adult learners from age 16 right up to retirement, on vocational skills, the skills people need for work, whatever they may be, tech for good, where technology can have a significant positive impact on learner outcomes and for the whole of society, and those sectors, geographies and communities that are underserved or left behind from mainstream provision. So what will we do? So today we kick off a work programme which takes forward the activities in the white paper, and we'll deliver these over the next 12 to 18 months. One of the really strong messages that came through in our green paper was the role that confidence plays, the confidence of learners, the confidence of teachers and trainers, the confidence of employers to develop, deploy and engage with learning. So we're going to run a targeted grant call on how VocTech can solve issues around confidence to create a step change in learner confidence and motivation, leading for better outcomes for learners. And by that, we mean people getting the skills that they need for work, to get a job or to progress in work. And we'll be publishing more details about the grant call in the coming weeks. We're going to work in partnership to commission pilot projects and research to support innovation and investment in the most underserved communities of learners to help reduce the digital divide. And we're going to encourage adoption and deployment of what works through showcasing and demonstration. And we're really pleased to have Maren with us on the panel from ALT. I was listening to a session earlier around, why we should use digital technology and the body of evidence for many, many years that shows it can really, really help. And we're going to advocate for change and support other organisations to tackle some of the underpinning wider societal challenges. As part of our planning for 2022, we're also going to do more work to strengthen the employer voice and also think about what more we can do to support FE to have greater impact with the brilliant VocTech innovations that they develop. So we really welcome your thoughts and your feedback. Please do engage. We're at UFI Trust on Twitter and LinkedIn. On our website, we have an online form. You can give us your feedback there. But we also have a brilliant panel here today to debate and discuss the themes of the white paper. So without further ado, I shall introduce the panel and then we'll get on with the debate. So it would be really great if you can just give a really quick summary of who you are and why you're interested in the topic before we kick off with some questions. So Maren, over to you.
Thanks, Louise, and hello, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here and see this white paper launched today. I'm Dr. Maren Deepwell. I'm the Chief Executive of the Association for Learning Technology, and we're the leading professional body for learning technology here in the UK. We've been doing this for nearly 30 years now, so there is definitely a lot of research, evidence, and practice that I'd like to contribute today.
Thanks, Maren. Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Milner. I'm the Programmes Director at the charity National Numeracy. We're absolutely delighted to see confidence right at the front of the green paper and the white paper, and that's my specific area of interest in this.
Thanks, Paul. Ziad.
Hi, I'm Ziad. I'm co-founder at Readable. We're a platform that makes the world's best stories easy to read for English language learners. Almost 1 million adults in the UK speak little or no English, and so that, of course, affects employability and vocational skills. I previously worked at BBC Learning, starting out at Webwise, which was a campaign where we taught millions of adults in the UK to use computers and go online. So I'm especially interested in UFI's focus on the role of technology in bridging the digital divide.
Thank you. And Jeff.
Hello, hi. I'm Jeff Greenidge. I'm a trustee of UFI. In fact, I worked with UFI back in 1999, setting up the original concept back then. I'm also the Director for Diversity at the Association of Colleges and the Education and Training Foundation. So my interest really is a joint one in seeing how technology can be used to level up, yes, but within the context of equity as being an outcome, equity for all, and inclusion as a means of achieving that particular outcome.
Jeff, that's really interesting. Could you explain a little bit more what kind of levelling up vocational learning means to you?
Yeah. Fundamentally, I believe in. I'm a teacher by trade, and I taught for a long time in the South Wales Valleys. And for me, it's about potential, and it's about how we, as educators, support young people, adults, in achieving their potential through our support. And with support, and that leg up, which equity ultimately is all about, I do believe that the FE vocational education and training system can see more and more learners succeed. But at the moment, I think there's an issue in that to ensure that as many people succeed as possible, our systems will need to be reimagined and our methodologies, the pedagogy rethought to include all our diverse learners. The pandemic showed us what needed to happen in a very, very short space of time, and people did things. But now let's use that as a stimulus to really rethink how best we can use the technology. And as a trustee of UFI, my interest really is in seeing UFI exemplify the potential of digital technology to support those reimagined methodologies. How can we make sure that it's accessible and equitable for all students? How can we see that how technology can help make knowledge and assessment more explicit and transparent so that you're bringing as many people into the frame as possible? And interestingly, how can you take out bias in some cases by fairly, in assessment terms, by fairly evaluating aspects of students' ability in an impartial way? And fundamentally, I think digital technology allied to really inclusive pedagogy and practice can support learner engagement. It can support progression, and it does, progression and retention, and it can really address some of the needs of our diverse student population. So here at UFI VocTech, we see some inspiring innovation in teaching and learning, and I really want us this year now to progress that and share those examples with the vocational education and training sector, but actually share them much more widely across the UK. So hopefully, Louise, that answered your question about my personal interest in this, and coming from a perspective of diversity and inclusion, as well as from the perspective of the technology.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. That's really interesting. I wondered, Paul, whether you had anything to add to that in terms of what levelling up learning means for you.
I think, it's all exacerbated by COVID. At National Numeracy, we tend to think about learners' motivations in terms of getting on at work or supporting children or managing their money. And we are increasingly thinking about the local effects, which we find that adults do tend to think locally about their motivations for learning. So, and for us, it's about people with the lowest skills and the lowest confidence. So if you overlay all those things, then that's our target audience, and they're the people we're trying to support through this.
Yeah, thank you. And Ziad, I wondered whether where you saw the biggest opportunities for technology to help reduce this growing divide, and I suppose I was thinking, technology can do an awful lot of things, but it's also got to kind of work on a scalable way and a commercial way as well. So it'd be really good to have your thoughts on where you see the opportunities for tech in this space.
I think there are probably the big opportunities are actually associated with the three of the big barriers in terms of bridging the digital divide, which are often cost, like a perceived lack of efficacy sometimes with digital learning content, and motivation. But the step before that is actually, I suppose, that there's a big opportunity for the government to directly address a large digital skills gap. I worked on WebWise 20 years ago. If anyone had told me 20 years later 9 million people would be struggling to use the internet independently, 30 million people would say they don't have the digital skills they need for work, I wouldn't have believed it. And what's worrying is that we're seeing some of the stigma that 20 years ago and still was associated with literacy is now being associated with digital skills, where people are embarrassed to talk about, to disclose a lack of digital skills. So I think that there's really welcome UFI's sort of commitment for addressing the divide. I mean, I guess in terms of those three areas, cost, efficacy, and motivation, where I think the opportunities are, I think we can bridge partly the digital divide with learning that is free or near free to learners, and that's everything from self-learning, which happens at the moment with in non-vocational and vocational with YouTube videos, to free to learner experiences, the poster child being Duolingo, free to facilitated learning, in the States, where people like Guild provide platforms where learners get free access to learning via their employers. So I think this growing expectation from learners that they'll be able to access free or near free learning is an opportunity area. The second area, I think, is in efficacy. There's just a real opportunity around pedagogic rigor in learning design. It's kind of ironic in a way, because we've just seen the biggest sort of content dump, really, of content online during the pandemic. But also, at the same time, compared to even 5 years ago, the knowledge in learning design around what works amongst learning designers, real strong pedagogy, has never been stronger, I don't think. So there's an opportunity. How do we accelerate the spread of good pedagogy practice to address the divide? And then finally, motivation. We know that motivation and self-study skills is a massive area where we can do more. And the fact is that developing skills takes a long time. We work in language learning, where we know that only too well. How can we use motivational things to bridge the gap? Because unless we have content and learning that learners can access because it's affordable, that they know will work because it's effective, that they know will keep them motivated and provide productivity assistance, and we're not going to get where we want to.
Thanks, Ziad. That's really interesting. Maren, I was kind of wondering on what you thought about those comments about the perceived lack of efficacy of digital learning, and how this is a kind of barrier for learners, for employers, and other stakeholders.
Well, I think it's important to emphasize the word perceived, because I think over the past year, many people's sort of first large-scale experience of using technology for learning, teaching, or assessment has been a crisis response. And while I don't want to take anything away from the absolutely amazing efforts that educators have made all across sectors to, keep learning going through a global crisis, there's been, very patchy kind of good practice and even less best practice. And I think there's been a lot of panic to try and deal with a situation that no one had been prepared for. What I think it is important now is to try and look at how we can move from that into a longer term, good quality blended or online option, depending on context. And also look at the kind of other drawbacks of technology. We've heard a lot about the potential, particularly for inclusion, which I completely agree with. But there are questions to be asked around some of the ethics of using certain types of technology, particularly around assessment, the rights of learners, and how we can help them develop the skills they need to understand what digital footprints they're generating throughout their learning journey, and how that data is being used and monetized, and what some of the crisis responses have brought with them in terms of unintended and unforeseen consequences. So this is one area where ALT is doing work with our members to set up an ethical framework for the use of technology in education that will provide a joint starting point for education providers, learners, teachers, and industry to have those conversations about what the ethical impact of learning technology is in the long term. And I was really heartened today to see some sessions here about digital well-being, looking sort of beyond, practical learning outcomes and more how it's impacting upon learners in a broader sense and in a social sense. So this is one of the areas where I think UFI's voice and work are so important.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? The social and emotional kind of factors that underpin learning and motivation to learn and good learning really came out in the discussions we had with people in the discovery phase and the content that went into the green paper. And Paul, I was wondering whether, kind of drawing on those points from Maren, you could talk a bit about your experience with with Stardust Studios and your work on national numeracy, about how you're using data and how you're involving your users in shaping your products, because that seems to be kind of quite a good way of exploring how to overcome some of those issues around efficacy and motivation.
Yes, I think we've been fortunate that the main provision we've got, like the National Numeracy Challenge and Stardust Studios, the app, that we set them up right from the start with really good data collection behind the scenes. So on the challenge, we've now got about, I think, 360,000 users that we can anonymously see what they're doing, how they're engaging, how they're improving, and that's confidence as well as skills. And initially that was just interesting, but it's now produced a really massive sort of data set that we can actually predict and then check, and then use that to talk to users to check that we're heading in the right direction and we're improving provision. It's been brilliant, actually, and it's changed the way I think about it.
Expand on that a bit. In kind of what ways has it changed how you've been thinking about what you're up to?
Because I think I knew it was a good thing to talk to users about what you were going to do and check in on them, but I didn't appreciate the power of combining big data with qualitative feedback from users and actually establishing a hypothesis from the data of what you think is needed, but then testing that out actually face-to-face or online. It's just a brilliant way of working.
Yeah, Jeff, I'd be really interested to get your perspective on this, and I was kind of wondering, having been a teacher, what you see those opportunities are for technology, and how you'd respond to Ziad's 3 points around cost, efficacy, and motivation.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, isn't there? I wouldn't mind picking up on Paul's point there about the data and the student feedback first, because that's really important in good teaching pedagogy. That to me is good teaching. You look at the results, and that tells you one story, and then you look at the students' appreciation of what's being taught and how it's being taught. That tells you another story, and you put those two stories together. And as a teacher, then you can reshape your curriculum and you can think through your methodology. And for me, one of the challenges with technology is that I think we can get excited by it. And forget that student feedback, that loop, that ability to help for the students to help us to co-design the curriculum. As Ziad was saying, there's lots and lots of stuff out there now, and part of the challenge for the profession is to how do we best make use of all that stuff that's out there? How do we package those things together to give learners a really good experience, to engage them, but also to help them progress and to develop their skills and competencies. And I do think that's one of the biggest challenges we're going to face, we are facing going forward. In terms of cost, efficacy, there's clearly a cost-benefit relationship, but I tend to think about things in terms of value. What's the value that we get from a particular way of working, from a particular technology? It might be extremely costly, but the value long term, in the long term benefits, the long term support for learners might outweigh that. So I think I would urge us to think beyond cost and to try to think of the long term value of particular ways of working. Now, for example, Socrates as a teacher, his long-term value in asking questions, it's been there for thousands of years, and it has never shifted. So that guy worked out how to ask good coaching questions long time ago, and we're still using that methodology now. So I think we have the ability to do that, and I've seen in some of the projects that come through to UFI, you could see the kernels of a long-term value in there. And I think part of the challenge of the business is to extract that, to find the essence of it, and then find ways of sharing that with the sector. So I'd urge us to go past the cost and to think about the value. And I'd also be stressing that it's, Alt, the work that you're doing is great, because you're bringing the sector together. You're getting people to think about that pedagogical practice, which is vital if we're going to use the technology sensibly.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I was, everybody's kind of mentioned a bit about choosing the right tech, and it's not just the tech on its own. And I think it's quite easy. One of my reflections on the green paper was it's quite easy for us to think about how to design digital tools to support confidence when people have decided to engage and to learn. But Paul, I was really wondering, from your experience with national numeracy, how you've kind of taken a blended approach. So, in your campaigns that you have with employers to encourage and support people to engage with learning, to start with, because I think, thinking back at those statistics from Robert Halfron, we've got a long way to go in terms of actually encouraging people to engage with learning before we even design great and motivating tools for them.
I think that's right. I'd completely agree with what Jeff's saying, that there's a lot of stuff out there now, actually. But we find the challenge is getting people to it, is encouraging, supporting people to actually engage. And this is brought out quite neatly in the green paper and the white paper. For adults who lack confidence, there's the confidence for them to engage in the first place, and then there's the confidence to use the digital provision that they're engaging with. And I think for us, and maybe this is because we're dealing with numeracy and maths, which evoke really strong emotional responses, that first challenge of getting people to engage is the main one for us, actually. It's the big one. And there's various ways of doing that. We find that a lot of adults just don't believe they can improve. And if you believe, there's a growth mindset gap. And if you believe that, then why would you bother trying? If you genuinely believe that your abilities are fixed in stone and you can't improve. We also find that emphasizing the practical value of the skills you're going to gain is really important. A lot of adults don't want to feel like they're just back in the classroom or learning for learning's sake. It's got to be, this is the real tangible value at work or in your daily life that this will bring. But even so, it's hard. And I think that ideally, whenever we're doing digital design, we should be incorporating that thing of how people are going to get to it actually within the solution. It's got to be almost part of it, that thinking. And then once adults get there, obviously, if they lack confidence, there's basic stuff we can do. I think phones, the way we use phones has got real potential, because we found there's a higher incidence of phone use for learning among less confident adults. So let's exploit that, really. And then it's got to be easy. It's got to be quick to use. You're immediately competing with other stuff online. If they're at work, then you're competing with emails and pop-ins from Teams or whatever. If they're not at work, then you're competing with social and live TV and all this other stuff. So not just with confident learners, you're only going to get a limited number of clicks and time out of them. So let's use them wisely. Let's make sure that each click counts for them, actually, not stuff we want to know, but for them. Make sure the language is simple and pitched at the right level. In fact, pitching at the right level, we might not have the money to create something that's adaptive and adapts to different adults, but there are other ways of making sure it's just nicely pitched and simple and clear. Bite-sized learning, rewarding progress, and then there's getting them back to it. So the hardest thing, I think, is getting to it in the first place, but then getting them back after they've done that initial visit, even if they did find it valuable, that's the second hardest thing, I think.
Yeah, it's really useful to hear your insights, and picking up on this question about pitching it at the right level and supporting learners who who aren't engaged to learn. Ziad, I really love it, or I wondered whether you'd share your story behind Readable and how you worked out that this was the right way to pitch your product and how you get those learners.
Yes, so for us, the challenge with our audience in the UK, almost 1 million adults who speak little or no English, is that actually they're quite motivated. They know that learning English is important. They know that the key to learning it is being immersed in it. But often English isn't spoken at home or with co-workers. If they're able to find a course, which have been really cut, but if they're able to find one, then like long working hours, lack of childcare can make attending regularly very difficult. And so for us, immediately that led to mobile and the potential for independent learning on mobile to overcome those barriers, as well as address the confidence issues. The privacy that you have with a mobile device allows you freedom that you don't maybe in a more social setting. But the challenge with mobile is that, like Paul said, you're competing in a really competitive attention economy where people are being bombarded with notifications and things that are incredibly desirable to spend your time on. And it's really got to the point where we need to raise our bar to think, well, how do I compete with Facebook and Snapchat and these other applications? They're not applications in a different sector. They're in our space. We're in the same space. And we felt that whilst there's lots of good online language learning courses, that it's difficult for them to retain learners over the length of time it takes to get results. And that really brought us to reading and reading for pleasure. There's just so much evidence about the efficacy of reading for pleasure on improving your language skills. It really can immerse you in an English-speaking world just while looking at your phone, take you to amazing places. But lots of really hard evidence about the effect it has on your proficiency. It can double the speed of learning English, research shows. It can improve all your skills, not just your reading skills. So, and actually, I think the final thing I'd say is in terms of confidence and motivation, there's nothing more confidence producing or motivating than getting results. Like when you start to see progress, that's what makes a real difference. And that's what will draw you away from, when I use Facebook or Instagram, I had to uninstall TikTok because I just lost so much time on it. And there's something you don't feel good about yourself when you spend too much time on them. And can we create experiences that really motivate and excite people and that they feel good about themselves when they finish? And for us, that's why story and we tell stories, I should say, in the form of chat messages as well as other formats, because we've really tried to explore how to create the most engaging experience that we can.
Yeah, thanks, Ziad. I think a few links have gone in the chat about Readable if people want to find out more, and also some of your work. I think the alt link's gone in as well, Maren. Someone in the UFI team in the background's doing a sterling job, I think. But Maren, on this point about about mobile devices and learning being utilized a lot through mobile devices, and this point of competition, where do you think that sits? In some ways, it's kind of challenging to think that you're competing with other things to learn to get the skills you need for work, but I suppose that's a reality, isn't it?
I guess it is, and I wonder. One of the questions we need to address really across the sector is, we can't expect every teacher to have the skills to design really engaging learning on a range of platforms and devices. There's obviously leveling up in terms of digital skills that we all have to do, but there are experts, the kinds of learning designers that we heard about earlier, learning technologists, educational designers and technologists who have got the skills to help you to gamify to produce really high content material that does attract learners, that helps be personal and flexible for the different audiences. And I think one of the things we've seen in our community and that we've found in our survey as well is that many institutions are starting to invest in that kind of professional expertise. Because while there is a lot we can all do now with mobile phones that might be in many pockets, many people still don't have access to the type of technology and infrastructure that they need to really deliver the highest quality learning experience. And they don't necessarily have to have all of that knowledge. So I think there is a lot that we can capitalize on from the expertise that we do have in professionals who can help teachers amplify their sort of passion for the subject and really reach those hard to reach learners. We've seen fantastic examples of, film clubs at FE colleges that have started making health and safety videos, which is really not the most attractive thing you would think that, learners that are sitting maybe at home or on a bus would want to engage with, but it has really started to pull people in and using quite simple technologies, really, digitally speaking, to engage people in different ways. And I think that the story and the sort of narrative arcs that Ziad is telling about is really powerful to help engage learners. I think often in my mind, it's not so much about the, expensive or complex technology. It's more about having the skills to really make the most of it, to design a learning experience that really engages.
And on that point, and I'm going to ask Jeff to respond afterwards, how do you feel we best support and champion that adoption of VocTech? And there are some comments in the chat around the skills and confidence of teachers and trainers. How do we champion and support it?
Is that for me?
I think for Maren and then for Jeff.
Sorry, I thought you were already going in with Jeff. Well, I just wanted to emphasize that I think professional recognition and professional development for teaching staff and expert staff is the key here. We've talked a lot about today the kind of recognition and success experience that we hope to get learners to experience with online or blended learning. I think the same has to apply to staff. We've run a professional accreditation scheme for over 10 years and also offer open badges and different other ways of pro-gain accreditation. But we meet so many teachers who have amazing skills and really haven't received yet the recognition. So I think one of the missions that we have to address is how to scale up professional recognition for the digital design and technology skills that many more professionals now have. And there's a key point here, I think, for senior managers and particularly governors, but also senior leaders in the sector, which is that they too need to develop some new digital skills and understand the sort of strategic opportunities and issues that they need to address. Because in order to lead effectively and to scale up this change that we are, in the middle of, that is no longer new, and that can't be ignored or delayed or shelved for another decade, is really important for them to upskill as well.
No, thank you, Maren. And really quickly, Jeff, I don't know whether you've got just a kind of couple of points to add to that before we wrap up.
Yeah, I have. I think there's something about a mindset shift that's required here, and for organisations to begin perhaps to think more about what we can do together in terms of partnership. Because we all tend to be working on the same thing, but from different perspectives. And back to the point of diversity, you bring those different voices together, and you get quite a powerful solution. So there's something about partnership there. I totally agree. There's something about raising the profile of the sector, but also I think that my final point really is about the quality. We can focus in on the cost, but I think looking at the value of things long term and trying to build in quality both in the content, but also in the pedagogy and in the practice, I think that will stand us in good long-term stead.
Well, thank you. I think that's a lovely note to finish on. Thank you so much, Paul, Maren, Ziad, Jeff, for joining the panel. And my call to action to the people listening is engage with our content, read the green paper, read the white paper, and keep in touch with UFI. So thank you so much.
Thank you.